as for the, alright, so let's get the new started. On the agenda. Alright, so let's start the introduction. Mr. Alejandro's Chair of Municipal Services.
Community Board Chair.
Michael Pimentel, Commissioner. Ari Buda, South Bronx Unit.
Anthony Perez, I'm the Bronx Borough Commissioner at NYCDOT. This is Athena Perez. I'm tired.
Teresa Cruz, Deputy Bronx Borough Commissioner, New York City DOT. Holly Malone, also with the Bronx Borough Commissioner's Office.
Nick Carey, Director of School Safety, New York City DOT.
Margaret Eder, Assistant Director for the Green Lakes at New York City DOT. Caitlin Towner, Project Manager in School Safety DOT. Allie Tan, Chief of Staff at Tree.
We finished the committee then.
Stephen Palmer, Community Associate for Bronx Community Board.
Good evening, Anthony Jordan, District Manager, Community Board of One. Thank you for hosting us.
All right, so we have a long presentation. Citizens for
No, go to school, but that's the order.
all right, okay, so, Mr. Perez. All right, so can you talk about?
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. As I mentioned, I'm Anthony Perez. I'm the Bronx Borough Commissioner of NYCDOT. The agency has been engaged with Dream Charter School and other schools in the corridor, who reached out to us to find ways to create safer corridors, particularly for students in these neighborhoods. Particularly here on Brooklyn Boulevard, we've all seen how much this particular area has changed. When I was growing up, I'm away from my Bronx site. When I was growing up, this area was predominantly industrial. But now you see many more residential buildings coming up, a lot more businesses. I found myself hanging out here most Fridays and Saturdays nights. It's a whole different area. And obviously, with schools here and all across the corridor, we want to make this more safer, livable, walkable, and we want to do whatever we can to get up with the times, make sure that the street designs are keeping up with the changes in the neighborhood. So as part of that, we initiated analysis to take a look at crash data, to take a look at safety concerns that we had, 311 complaints, testimonials from the schools along the corridor, the businesses. We spoke to stakeholders such as First Direct. We held workshops along the corridor as well in the area, and we took all that together to synthesize and get a proposal for the community to consider. We will go through the presentation, and we look forward to hearing your feedback at the community board. I will pass it over to Nick who will lead the presentation.
Thank you, Anthony. So I don't need to speak into this mic, I can just get more mic over there. All right, great. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us. There's been enough intro, so I'm just going to jump into it. Is this how it works? All right. A little background before we get into the proposal. So as Anthony mentioned, there's a few things going on. There's a few conversations happening simultaneously. Dream Charter reached out to us, safety concerns in front of their campus, which is here. But for those of you at home, this is on the south side of Brooklyn Boulevard, just east of Lincoln Avenue, near the entrance to the 3rd Avenue Bridge. We've also received complaints about safety conditions in front of the South Bronx Charter School at 133rd Street and Cypress Place. So those conversations are happening at the same time, as I'm sure you're all aware. There's been an ongoing process at DOT to help scope and design and build a Harlem River Greenway. So we've been doing a lot of outreach around that for the last year and a half. So first, let's talk about some of the school outreach we've done. We've been in contact with Dream Charter Schools since last year. We've had remote meetings and in-person meetings and field meetings and walkthroughs. Our DOT Commissioner Rodriguez had a walkthrough with Deputy Council Speaker Ayala. So it's something that we're looking into, and it's important to us. And in February, Dream Charter hosted a stakeholder meeting in this room on on their campus. And there were different stakeholders from the Bruckner Boulevard corridor, businesses, residences, and there were also representatives of city agencies. Sanitation was here, police, we were present. And we've also, of course, been meeting with South Bronx Charter School to talk about their issues and what we can do to improve things there. And so while these conversations with the schools have been going on, we've made some minor operational changes in front of the school sites, but it was really just the first pass, just a sort of an attempt to see if there's something we could do quickly. But tonight we're hoping to propose something a little bit more substantial that will have bigger impact. All right, let's talk about the Greenway outreach. And, you know, one of the challenges for us with this project is that we need to zoom way in and get really detailed in the minutia of these school sites. And what's the parking regulation? What are the traffic volumes? What are the signal timings? But we also need to zoom way out to the borough-wide scale so that we can think big picture about what it would take to build a 7-mile greenway that would go all the way from Van Cortlandt Park to Randall's Island. It's a really exciting project. It would connect neighborhoods to the waterfront. It would connect neighborhoods to each other. Obviously, there's a recreation and public health component to this. It's not just transportation, but continuity is the key. So for greenways, they're not useful if they only exist in segments. So this is a list of some of the outreach we've done in South Bronx over the last year and a half about the Harlem River Greenway. You know, we've tabled at events, we've had walkthroughs, we've met with elected officials. But most important for our meeting tonight, I think, is that we hosted a workshop at Bronx Brewery back in March, and then we hosted a subsequent remote workshop over Zoom. And the purpose of the workshops was to discuss the preferred routing for the Harlem River Greenway through Mont Haven. And so we had these workshops and we were asking people where we should route the Greenway. So we could route the Greenway down 138th Street. We could route it down Bruckner Boulevard, or we could route it down the waterfront south of 132nd Street. And when we asked people what they thought of Bruckner Boulevard, we actually heard a lot of positive comments, specifically about how it connects really well to the Willis Avenue Bridge and the Randall's Island Connector Bridge. But we heard a lot of concerns too. People were concerned about the schools and concerned about truck traffic. And they were concerned about bikeability. A lot of people told us that they don't feel comfortable biking on Bruckner Boulevard today in its current configuration. So what emerged from this process is that Bruckner Boulevard is the preferred near-term route for the Greenway through Mont Haven. The waterfront location would be great, and that's still something we want to do long-term. But in the short term, the waterfront has too many feasibility issues tied to ownership and egress. And 138th Street would be great too. It's a commercial corridor. There could be some synergy there with the Greenway, but it's just too narrow east of 3rd Avenue to fit everything in. So Bruckner Boulevard, despite its challenges, is the winner because it has the connectivity and the width. So, talking about all these different outreach processes coming together, what it means for us is an overlap in goals for DOT on Bruckner Boulevard. We want to make it safer and better access to the schools, but we also want to think big about how we can make the Greenway work here. And at first glance, that might sound like a challenging thing to balance, like maybe these things are mutually exclusive, and you can't do both these things at once. But from our perspective, they complement each other nicely. But we'll get more into that in a second. So for tonight, what we really want to talk about is what we hope to do this year, ideally. We want to focus on Bruckner Boulevard between Willis Avenue and Lincoln Avenue, including the Tree and Charter School block here, and also 133rd Street at Cypress Place. We want to focus on those this year because those are the school sites, and we feel like it's imperative that we do something now. But the idea is that we would come back in the future, ideally next year, with the proposal to build out a redesign of Bruckner Boulevard between Willis Avenue and St. Anne's Avenue, and to close the gap on Green. But for now, what we want to really focus on is these blocks with school sites. All right, let's talk about the existing conditions. So looking at the crash statistics across the corridor over the last 5 years, one pattern that emerges is that the overwhelming something like 70% of the injuries are people in cars, which is not that surprising when you think about it, because much of the corridor has very little pedestrian and bicycle traffic, especially east of Willis Avenue. But west of Willis Avenue, it's a different story. There's always been the retail piece near Alexander and residences there, but now there's all this new residential development. There's more commercial activity. Dream Charter School is obviously a major pedestrian trip generator. So, we're seeing this change in land use, and we can only expect the pedestrian traffic around here to increase. So it's critical that we take this opportunity to rethink our priorities on the Brooklyn Boulevard corridor for its design. We still want to accommodate trucks, and support the IBZ, but we need a more human-centered design. So, talking about these first two blocks between Lincoln Avenue and Willis Avenue, just broadly a couple big picture things. First of all, it's a local truck route. Now, I should just mention that there's emerging land uses of residential and school and retail, but there is still industrial activity happening around. And part of this being a local truck route is that we need to make sure trucks can function. The lanes need to be wide enough for trucks. Trucks need to be able to make the turns without jumping the curb or getting stuck. Another thing to point out is the varying roadway widths. One unusual piece of the Bruckner corridor is that every block is a slightly different width. I'm not sure why. But you can see in the cross sections, this block here between Lincoln and Alexander is 70 feet wide, and the next block down between Alexander and Willis is only 60 feet wide. So already these two blocks kind of look and feel very different. The last thing I want to mention is that the traffic flow here is very lopsided. West of Willis specifically is what I'm talking about. There's a lot of traffic heading westbound to the 3rd Avenue Bridge. A lot of cars and trucks going up the bridge. Very little traffic heading eastbound.
There's a reason for that.
So
There's a reason for that. Most of the traffic.
he's right. Look, he's right. It's because people are heading westbound because the 3rd Avenue Bridge is a southbound only bridge. So there's a lot of flow going that way. There's a little bit of volume coming back eastbound. They could be coming from the little service road next to the bridge, or coming from Lincoln Avenue. But most of the volume is heading westbound. And now, east of Willis Avenue Bridge, it's a different story, totally different pattern. But over here, westbound is heavy and eastbound is heavy. So let's talk about the individual blocks specifically. This here is existing conditions between Lincoln Avenue and Alexandra. This is the Dream Charter School block. For those of us in this room, we're here right now. Long pedestrian crossing distances. So this is a 70-foot wide street. That is really, really wide to be crossing on foot. Even if you're healthy and able-bodied, you can walk 3 feet per second, 3.5 feet per second. You're still, to cross the 70-foot wide street, you're still crossing for 20 to 25 seconds. You're exposed. You're looking over both shoulders, hoping that turning vehicles see you and will yield, because it's not guaranteed. But what would be even worse? What if you had a toddler on your head? And what if you're carrying groceries and pushing a stroller? How much more challenging would that be? Or even worse, imagine a child crossing the street this wide. We know that children are smaller, right? They're shorter, so it's harder for drivers to see them. Especially if you're in a large truck or a large SUV, it's a lot harder to see these kids. And then because the kids are shorter, they have reduced visibility. They can't see as far as we can. They can't see over a car's hood the way some of us might be able to. And then we also know that children's brains are still developing. So it's harder for a child to find a gap in traffic, or it's harder for them to assess the gaps in traffic if there are none. And more broadly speaking, I think we can all agree that children have underdeveloped risk assessment. So it's really a very difficult place for kids to cross. It's a difficult place for anybody to cross, really, but it's too wide a street. Next thing I want to mention is that the excess width leads to speeding near the school. So you have all these challenges for pedestrians, and then from the driver's perspective, everything about the roadway's design is telling you that you can speed. The road is too wide, the lanes are too wide, there's too many lanes. A lot of the traffic here, they just got off the highway, they've been on the Deegan for who knows how long, and they're trying to get to the 3rd Avenue Bridge, and So in that sort of situation where you're fresh off the highway, maybe you're still driving a little too fast, maybe you're not looking out for pedestrians the way you should. And then the roadway design kind of reinforces the idea that you're still on the highway. It's doubly bad for pedestrians because they're exposed to these long crossing distances and drivers are emboldened to behave accordingly. There's also long distances between pedestrian crossings. So if you want to cross Bruckner Boulevard, there's a signal at Lincoln Avenue, there's a signal at Alexander Avenue, but there's nothing in between. It's 650 feet in between these two signals. So if you're mid-block, not far from where I'm standing now, if you want to cross the street, are you going to walk for 90 seconds to get to the signal, cross it, and then walk 90 seconds back? Of course not. You're just going to cross, and that's what we're seeing in the field. We're seeing kids doing it a lot. And it's part of the student loading challenges happening, where what we often see is the parents will pull up on the north curb, double park, leave their car there, and then cross with their kids mid-block through this high-speed truck route. It's really a pretty harrowing situation. But the loading challenges are on both sides of the street. We see double parking issues right in front of the school as well. Illegal mid-block U-turns is a problem. Hopefully that's been somewhat mitigated by the bollards we installed down Center Median. And finally, there's high loading demand for other businesses. I'm coming here from the school safety unit at DOT, and our focus is on preventing youth traffic injuries or worse and helping school operations. So we kind of have a bias towards the school, but there's a lot of other things happening on this block. There's a lot of other businesses that have loading needs, and for them to function, they need to be able to get to the curb. All right, here's one more photo of this site. I just want to point out that the double parking issue. Part of the problem here is that the street is so wide that drivers know that they can double park here without really impacting traffic. And it emboldens them to do so. So the challenge for us, we need to redesign this. We need to tighten things up. We need shorter crossing distances. We need to make it harder to speed. But we also have to get people to stop treating Bruckner Boulevard like a parking lot. And fight back at that culture of double parking. All right, I'll move on. So looking at the next block between Alexander and Willis Avenue, it's a little bit more narrow. This is 60 feet wide, whereas this block is 70 feet wide, but it's still wide. And a lot of the issues in this block translate to that block as well. Long crossing distances. There's long distance between pedestrian crossings. But what's interesting is how different the land use is just one block over. There's so much retail happening on the north curb that there's metered parking to help deal with the huge demand for parking and loading on the north curb, where all the retail is. And then the south curb is all of these new high-density apartment buildings, and one of them is just finishing up right now, just east of Alexander Avenue. So I mentioned before that we can expect more and more pedestrian traffic in the area, and this block certainly falls within that. All right, let's talk about the Willis Avenue intersection. This is really unusual and kind of interesting intersection. So one piece, and this is under the Willis Avenue Bridge, so it's kind of hard to see. But the first piece I want to mention is that this photo here is facing south towards Bruckner. And you can see there's a double right turn arrow. And what this really is the off-ramp to the major Vegan Expressway, people getting off and going towards the 3rd Avenue Bridge. So it's a very heavy turn, 2 lanes turning at the same time. And that turn happens at the same time as the crosswalk across Bruckner. So if you're walking across Bruckner here, you've got 2 lanes of heavy highway traffic turning across you. And so this is an issue that we usually try to mitigate either by having a single turn lane or by keeping them separate signal phases, but this was sort of a red flag to us when we were first looking at the area, something we want to fix. This is still Willis Avenue, so this looks a little weird from this perspective. If I showed you an aerial photo, it would all be obscured by the bridge. But if you were to go under the bridge, it would look like this. So you can see in the upper left, there's the double right turn I was just showing a photo of. There's these weird skewed crosswalks across Bruckner Boulevard here. And so a couple things with them. One, they make the crossing even longer because of their angle. And they also make this kind of circuitous routing for people walking and biking, especially if you're a cyclist trying to get to the Willis Avenue Bridge. You have to take this tortured path to get up to the Willis Avenue Bridge path on 35th Street. Another thing I want to mention here It's a little bit inside baseball, so stay with me. The northbound and the southbound approaches to the intersection it's a weird intersection, they're kind of offset in this way. And one result of that is that the northbound and the southbound cannot get the green light at the same time. You can imagine how if they were both going, they would just kind of mash into each other. So as a result, the northbound and the southbound have separate signal phases. Now, this is an operational detail you wouldn't usually bring up in a community board meeting, but it's relevant to our proposal, so stay with me. And then moving over to the other site, this is the South Bronx Charter School site at 133rd Street and Cypress Avenue. I'm sorry, I forgot to put labels on here. This is 133rd Street on the bottom. Bruckner Boulevard is up here. And this funny little loop is called Cypress Place. So this building is basically an island in this strange location. And as you can imagine, there's lots of students that come and go during drop-off and pickup. And there are no sidewalks, there are no crosswalks to access this space. Coming from 133rd Street, there's no real legal, safe way to access the site. And it's, it's a smaller street, 133rd Street, it's only got one lane of traffic, but it's a slight turn, kind of a soft turn off of Bruckner. And there's still lots of trucks using it. Trucks who are trying to get to southern parts of Fort Morris. So here's another picture of the site. An awkward situation. Guys, we made it to the proposal. Thank you for your attention. That was so long. All right. First of all, broadly speaking, just conceptually, what we're thinking for the Bruckner Boulevard corridor is very similar to what you see today on Willis Avenue, north of Willis Avenue Bridge. Not exactly, but pretty close. So this photo of Willis Avenue, I think we're facing south from 141st. And you can see there's 3 travel lanes, there's 2 parking lanes, there's a 2-way protected bike lane on one side of the street, there's painted pedestrian islands that shorten the crossing distance, there's signal phasing changes that have happened. This is pretty similar to what we want to propose to the Bruckner corridor, just for starters, all right, and then we'll get into it. But before I get into it too much, I want to briefly mention the surprising pedestrian safety benefits of protected bike lanes. If you haven't heard the spiel before, the reason I say surprising is that you would intuitively think that somebody riding a bike is the main beneficiary of a bike lane. But as it turns out, protected bike lanes are one of the best tools we have for improving pedestrian safety. And the reason is, it's not the bike lane itself, it's all the things that come with the bike lane. So whenever we install protected bike lane, we usually, in order to do that, remove excess vehicle lanes that aren't needed. Doing so, we reduce speed. We install the pedestrian islands to shorten the crossing distances and slow the turns. We clear parking in the corners to improve visibility. We take a comprehensive look at the signal timing and all the traffic volume to see if there's anything we can mitigate there. And all this stuff adds up to a lot of pedestrian safety benefits. So earlier when I was mentioning that the overlapping goals on Bruckner Boulevard seems challenging, or it seems like they might be mutually exclusive. This is why we feel like they complement it nicely. Because we want to make it safer for the school, greenway or not, protected bike lanes is one of the best tools we've got. All right, done with that. Let's talk about what we want to do. So first, let's talk about these 2 blocks of Bruckner Boulevard between Lincoln Avenue and Willis Avenue. So big picture, what we're proposing is 1 eastbound lane, 2 westbound lanes. So 2 lanes heading to the 3rd Avenue Bridge, which is where most of the volume is. 1 lane heading eastbound, where there's a lot less cars. We're proposing a 2-way protected bike lane along the south curb of Bruckner Boulevard, except in front of the school, in front of Green Charter, where the bike lane would end and there would be a painted shared space. The kids' pedestrians private. We'll talk more about that in a second. We would also install, as part of this proposal, a signalized mid-block pedestrian crossing, basically right here, but for everybody watching from home, mid-block crossing halfway between Lincoln Avenue and Alexander Avenue, a signalized pedestrian crossing. Because we've been seeing so many people crossing the block, we think this could help make that a lot safer. We would also add exclusive pedestrian crossing time at Bruckner and Lincoln, Bruckner and Alexander, and Bruckner and Willis. We'll get to that more in a moment. And finally, we want to convert Willis Avenue to one-way southbound for just 1 block between Bruckner and 132nd, so the block south of Bruckner Boulevard. We want to convert Willis Avenue to one southbound. For a few reasons, one of the things is that we can add a parking there. All right, now for the nitty-gritty details. So, okay, let's talk about this block, Lincoln to Alexander. So again, mid-block, signalized pedestrian crossing, all right, that's one thing. Now let's look at these cross sections. The cross sections here are all facing east. So the south is on the right, the school is on the right. So the top cross section is the existing condition. Do this. You can see the extra wide travel lane in front of the school site. There's 2 lanes heading to the bridge, and right before the end, there's this right turn bay. Next graphic down is our proposal for the block in general. Two lanes heading westbound, 1 lane heading eastbound. Floating parking lane out here, a 2-way protected bike lane on the south side of the street, and a 4-foot wide painted median with bollards in it to continue to prevent U-turns. And so then in the last cross section, you can see what would happen in front of the school site, where bike lane would end, buffer would end, and this would be a painted shared space that is pedestrian priority. The cyclists will be permitted to go through, but we would use a combination of signage and markings to help establish the pedestrian priority in this space. And that is for a few reasons. I think it offers some operational flexibility for the school. We've seen enormous crowds of students coming and going, so it's kind of an unusual design for us, but we think it's warranted in this case. We would also, as part of this proposal, install leading pedestrian interval signal phases for all crosswalks, crossing Lincoln and Bruckner and at Alexander Brook. So if you're not familiar with it, the leading pedestrian interval is where we let pedestrians go 7 to 10 seconds before cars. It helps pedestrians, we give them a head start, and it's really useful in establishing the pedestrian priority. And so to do all this on this block would require the removal of 10 parking spaces for a few reasons. One is the mid-block crossing that you could park where the crosswalk would be. Obviously, you won't be able to park there afterwards if there's a crosswalk. We'd also have to remove a couple spots near Alexander to improve visibility, and a few spots closer to Lincoln. I'll show why. So let's look at this plan view. Now, this is a rough schematic design. This is not a final engineering drawing because of both of those standards. But so you can see that the Green Charter School is on the south side. You can see the mid-block crosswalk with an island. That lane comes in and it ends in front of the school. You see the painted shared space. What else is there? One other kind of weird thing is that we were talking about the 3rd Avenue Bridge, and how unusual that is. So here's the entrance to the 3rd Avenue Bridge. There's this little service road heading eastbound next to the not next to the 3rd Avenue Bridge, but next to it. So we have to accommodate that lateral translation for the cars that have to come up through here. So we have to remove a few spots here, but that means that we have room for a pedestrian island here, which would be really useful, as well as a pedestrian island at the mid-block pedestrian crossing. So today, when you're crossing this, you have 70 feet of crossing, right, minus the curb extensions. But under this proposal, a parent and children would be crossing. They have maybe 15 feet here where they're exposed to turning vehicles. But it's a tight space, and the island forces people to turn more slowly through. And then for the rest of the space, there's no turn conflicts. Today, somebody might, drive aggressively through the crosswalk and get through here, but with this island here, they're forced to make a harder turn. And even though we're going to give some exclusive pedestrian time, those 7 to 10 seconds, for pedestrians to go first, maybe you move it a little slower, maybe you enter the crosswalk at the end of the phase, you could still wait in the aisle if you don't make it all the way across. And that's really useful for seniors, people with kids who are moving a little bit slower. So, and also, before we move on, I want to point out that this is not our usual treatment in front of the school. Protected bike lanes in front of the school, sometimes we get a negative reaction when we talk about them. They're actually very common. You see them all over the city, all over the roads. And typically in front of the school, we would just have the bike lane continue. But in this case, based on our observations of huge crowds coming in and out of the school, we thought it made more sense to try to share space out. We have to harden it. You're not seeing it in the graphic here, but to keep cars out of this space, we would use a combination of granite blocks, and planters. And for this to work, Dream Charter School would have to agree to help maintain. For this to work, it's a continued relationship between DOT and Dream Charter, but we think it can work. But just to point out, because again, we often get these really negative knee-jerk reactions when we propose a protected bike lane in front of the school. It's very common, you see it everywhere, so I wanted to point out a couple locations that are nearby. So this is Port Morris School at Jackson Avenue and 149th Street. We installed this protected bike lane in 2021, I believe. This is Willis Avenue School, at Willis Avenue, 139th Street. Admittedly, the entrance to the Willis Avenue School is actually on 139th, on Willis. But, we're seeing children crossing a protected bike lane. It's not as exotic as you may. Another little design element here is just daylighting, if you're not familiar with the concept. This photo, I think, is from China Park East. And you can see the before after how removing a single parking spot, you can do so much to improve visibility of pedestrians and opposing traffic. And this is a design component of all protected bike lanes. We always do this. Last note here, an example of a bike lane ending in shared space. This is Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, totally different context. But the idea is that the bike lane ends, and then we paint the street with this tan color that's more like pedestrian space. And have the bicycle symbols there so people know, yes, you're permitted to bike here, but this is pedestrian priority space. Don't expect people to jump anyway. Okay, I'll move on to the next block. So now I'm talking about between Alexander and Willis Avenue. Now this block, if you recall, is a little bit more narrow than the Lincoln to Alexander block. It's 60 feet wide. So in the cross sections, you can see the existing 2 lanes per direction. Pretty standard. In the proposed condition, we remove one of the eastbound lanes, so we install a 2-lane protected bike lane along the south curb. And it's not as wide as the preceding block, so we don't have room for all the extra buffers and stuff, but we can make it all just work. But one challenge here is that when you're doing a 2-way protected bike lane on one side of a 2-way street, there's rules about some of the signal stations. So at Bruckner Boulevard and Alexander Avenue, we have to install a westbound left protected turn signal. So if the car is going westbound toward the 3rd Avenue Bridge, they turn on the southbound Alexander. That turn has to have a protected turn signal phase for this design to work. So to do that, we have to make room for the turn lane. And to do that, we have to remove the 7 parking spots on the south curb near Alexander Avenue. So that's a drawback. We want to point that out, be upfront about that for all the stakeholders on that. All right, Willis Avenue, this is a wild one. Let's dig in, I'm excited about this. So first, we want to convert Willis Avenue to one-way southbound, just for the one block between Bruckner and 132nd Street. The number of cars traveling northbound here is negligible. It's like 5 or 6 an hour, 8 times a day. We want to do it for a few reasons. One reason is it allows us to install equal parking on one side of Willis Avenue, giving us a net parking gain of 6 spots. It also allows us to install this large painted curb extension here to help shorten the crossing distances. The other benefit to converting Willis Avenue to one-way southbound, remember I mentioned earlier that in the current configuration, the northbound and southbound approaches have different signal phases. If there's no longer a northbound approach, if we convert Willis Avenue to southbound, there's no longer any cars coming up Willis Avenue. We can reassign that signal time to an all pedestrian barn stand signal phase. So for 35 seconds, all of these crosswalks would have a walk signal and all the cars would be held, which has a number of benefits, just in general for mitigating vehicular turn conflicts, but it's especially exciting to us because it helps us mitigate this double right turn off the beacon. Sure.
Which street is it that you're saying is one way?
Sorry, this is Bruckner Boulevard,
Right.
east-west. This is Willis Avenue down here.
Yeah, so how is it?
It dead ends sort of at 132nd Street. Or it doesn't dead end,
It does go around.
it goes around 132nd up to. So yeah, we would get the signal phase so that all the crosswalks will go together. One other thing that I'll mention here is that we would install perpendicular crosswalks, which are shorter and they improve connectivity to the bridge. And what else? We've installed 2 concrete pedestrian islands and 2 painted curving sections. This is a lot to wrap our head around. It's complicated for us, all these moving parts, so I understand you have questions. But I just want to mention that whenever we do something like this, not just Willis Avenue, but this whole project, whenever we're proposing like a one-way conversion, or changes to the number of lanes on a street, or new signal phasing, or a new mid-block crossing, rest assured, whenever we've done that and brought it to the public, that we've analyzed it thoroughly. For us to get the sign off to be able to go public with a proposal like this, we have to check this and check it carefully. And we're confident that all the changes we're proposing will not have any impact on traffic. And we've adjusted, in our analysis with our engineers, we've made adjustments to make sure things will work. For example, the mid-block crossing in front of Dream Charter School won't impact traffic flow here, it won't impact trucks getting on the bridge. All right, move on. The last piece of the proposal is in front of South Bronx Charter School on 133rd Street and Cypress Place. So basically, here it's pretty simple. We want to install 2 stop signs on either side, on both of the entrances to the school, and add crosswalks. And then a little bit of painted pedestrian space in front of the school where kids are gathering out front to help give them the space to be. Doing this requires the removal of 6 parking spots around the school center. So this is a little bit more straightforward than what we're talking about on Willis. All right, so in summary, we're talking about a 2-way protected bike path, South 30th Brook, from Willis to Lincoln, except for in front of the school site where we would have shared pedestrian space. New mid-block signalized pedestrian crossings, mid-block between Lincoln and Alexander. New crosswalks across Bruckner Boulevard at Willis Avenue, those perpendicular ones. We would convert Willis Avenue one way southbound between Bruckner and 132nd, install annual parking there. We would add exclusive pedestrian crossing times at Bruckner and Lincoln, Bruckner and Alexander, and a all pedestrian barn stand signal phase at Willis Avenue. And we would install new stop control crosswalks across 133rd Street to the South Bronx Charter School at Cypress Place. And the benefits, we would get improved pedestrian access with 6 new crosswalks down the corridor, shorter pedestrian crossings, single timing enhancements that give pedestrians a head start and completely mitigate the highway turn conflict off the Deegan from Willis. Slower turns and reduced speeding by tightening the roadway up. With the shared space in front of Dream Charter, we think will provide a lot of operational flexibility. And a new segment of a Harlem River Greenway. Very exciting. Okay, I'm done. Thank you so much. That was long. Is there any questions?
I got a question.
Okay.
Have you been making some changes, never realized that it's a problem somewhere? How long does it take to make a correction? Or just leave it as it is?
No, absolutely, we make the change. So one thing that's useful about this process, there's 2 kinds of ways we can redesign a street. One way is that we do a capital project, where we completely rebuild the street, the Department of Design and Construction gets involved, all the different agencies, all the utilities. It can take a really long time. And, there's more things you can do. You can play with drainage and move tree pits and stuff, but that's a really long-term process, and you're kind of finalized when it's done. You're not even allowed to touch it for 5 years because of the federal funding. What we're doing here is an internal, in-house street improvement project where we use our on-call contracts and our in-house crews to make most of these changes. And because we're not some consultant, flown in from out of town, we're here and we're always be involved, we'll always be responsible. So often when these projects go in, something doesn't work. There's always something. A little parking regulation needs to be tweaked at the very least. There's always something when you make changes to the scale. But we have to stay in communication with the community board and with the stakeholders and identify the issues. And part of it, I have to say, is that there's often an adjustment period. People have to get used to the new traffic patterns. They have to get used to the new rules. Right now, people are really accustomed to double parking, just all over the place. To park the car in the middle of the street, they're going to have to get used to not doing that. So there is a transition period, but, we always stay in conversation and we, make adjustments. And I think part of this is that ideally we would come back next year to close the gap between Willis and St. Anne's. So you can rest assured that we'll definitely be back. But to answer your question more specifically, sorry, this is getting long-winded, it depends on the scale of the change. If the change we need to make is ripping a signal out, doing a bunch of construction, that might take a little more time. If it's adjustments to parking regulations or signal timing, that's something we can do very quickly.
But my problem was not really a parking issue, it's just usually we kind of like, theoretically, we kind of figure what things should be. Then when we really implement it, then the neighborhood, the community, people realize that maybe the light is taking too long crossing the street. And oftentimes, some of the accidents due to the fact that the driver and the patient, they realize that it takes too long at this intersection, so they want to rush into it. That's where the problem occurs most of the time. Because you used to that street, you know that you spend 45 seconds waiting for the light to change. And then when you come closer, you want to rush cross that before you spend 40 seconds. The 40 seconds to a driver that is in a hurry is like eternity. And then the victim usually are a pedestrian or crossing somebody's, striking somebody's car, because it's driving around.
You nailed it. This is one of the things that's so difficult about trying to design a street to be safer and more pedestrian friendly is that when it comes to delay, for all roadway users, people have limits. And there's only so much they can take. And at a certain point, you design something, it might look perfect on paper, but if people lose their patience and just go for it, it could be worse than what's already out there. So that's part of the challenge for us. And that we want to reduce the capacity and make it more pedestrian friendly. But we're careful about delay, we're careful about queue length, we're careful about the time that you're going to be waiting, we're careful about the length of the queues. All these things contribute to driver anxiety and can lead to bad behavior. So I definitely hear what you're saying. And it's something that we try to balance. But it's also something that we can maybe rebalance after it goes in if we have to make changes.
Have you ever had a chance to go back and revisit to change the situation to accommodate that?
Yes.
Or something that's probably
No, yeah.
Yes, sir.
you've done it?
Yes.
Okay.
We do it all the time, we go back, a project that was done last year, a project that was done 5 years ago, a project that was done 10 years ago. We can be independent of that and make some changes as needed.
I can almost guarantee a project of this scope, there'll be changes afterwards. Always something,
Okay.
What's the difficulty with reducing the speed limit? Reducing the speed limit for that whole street when they come off the Bronx down here. What's the difficulty with reducing the speed limit?
Below 25?
Well, the speed limit right now is 25, right?
It's 25, yeah.
So what's difficult with reducing down to 15?
I think not that long ago, we couldn't, it's a little bit up there because a law was just passed called Sammy's Law. I don't fully understand the implications of it, but the city was recently given the authority to change its speed limits.
Yeah.
But we're still working out how to roll that out and where to do it. One of the challenges with that, I shouldn't get too deep into it because it's not my expertise, but one of the challenges is that we don't want to have certain blocks be 20, and then the next block is 25, and the next block is 50. So that's one of the challenges. But
I'm glad they kind of said, I've lived in this whole area as California. And I remember it used to be up and down, it was industrial area, but doing that whole strip from there, the multi cars that going west, everyone can get on the second avenue and get the off going south. So we use it for 15 miles an hour, but the school stuff new. For that whole stretch from the brother, from that end, this is right there, it's 15 miles per hour. You be surprised, a number of drivers will find different ways and means to get nowhere. They'll cut over on 38th Street, just get across it, and they realize it'll be a rock and hard place.
absolutely.
So it's reduced to 15 for that whole stretch. Yeah. Not just 1, 2 stops, that whole stretch. This is reduced because when that young girl that killed on 3rd Avenue, they changed the configuration of 3rd Avenue from 100 to 39th
that, as part of this plan, if someone were to explain into this, because we want to restrict balance, and that's what's really important here, because obviously, there's a school safety team that's originated through a school safety request, but we know that it's not just a school in this neighborhood. And we also want to make sure that the trucks that are delivering to First Direct, or to Valley, or going to Manhattan, they can still do the business. That the restaurants can still get the deliveries, and that the residents can still get home after a long day of work. So we could theoretically just put it down to 5 miles per hour. No, we legally can't, theoretically, if we were to do that, but that wouldn't be good for every other stakeholder in the community. So we want to strike that balance of how do we make it safe for kids, but also make it a vibrant, livable, working community that has other needs and other systems.
Yeah, parking lot in here, would be parking cars in here.
There's one right on the other side of this block. Next one.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to go back to the bike lane with the Greenway. It seems that the reason why Bronx Boulevard was chosen is because it was probably the most direct route. Now, was there consideration given to having a route that mixes, like, so if you look at the map, some of it goes on the waterfront, or one route goes on the waterfront, and one route just goes to the boulevard, was there consideration given to have it mixed? So maybe like you can avoid having a bike lane, not against bike lanes, I don't want to make that clear, because it may sound like it, but in thinking about pedestrian safety and cyclist safety, was thought given to having a mix of, for a portion of, you avoid Brooklyn Boulevard, and then further up, you may, the bike lane will go on Brooklyn Boulevard, instead of having it all throughout Brooklyn Boulevard. I don't know if that makes sense.
I'm gonna kick that question in a second to Mark Roderu, the Deputy Director of Greenways, who's overseeing this outreach process, but generally speaking, I can say that, when we're routing bike lanes, we've tried this before, having people go these wiggle routes to avoid buildings we don't like, to avoid difficult land use. What we find is that nobody does it. People, just like when you're walking, you want to cross the street, you're not willing to go all the way over to the signal. People biking from A to B, 9 times out of 10, if you say, can you go a few blocks out of your way, they just keep going. Even if the conditions you're putting them into are terrible, and there's no bike lane there, they just go. Just like the rest of us, biking and walking and riding. What do you think, Margo?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, and I also wanted to emphasize what you said before about how we are still intending to propose a longer-term waterfront route, which is the goal, and would be the most pleasant experience for bikers and walkers. But what we can do now is on local streets on Rockland Boulevard. And there's a bit of a connectivity issue where there aren't that many connection points from Rockland Boulevard to the waterfront, there's a land use there. So I'm not sure where that would work.
I just want to add to that too, to the points that, now, 8.1 waterfront version, that was, as I mentioned, and I think that there are local groups out there, South Bronx and others, who are working towards that dream of getting us closer to the water. If we had this accessible now, I think that's what we would have been. But I think we all know there's complex land use issues along the waterfront. And I would say that I frame this as a not-mutually exclusive. I think we could have one in Berkeley County, and in the future we could have one in the waterfront. And I don't think it has to be like here or there. So I think it's one of the things we want to do. How can we walk and chew gum? What can we do now in 2024, even though the bigger dream might come 10 years later?
Well, and even if we do ultimately do a greenway along the water, that's not mutually exclusive with the utility of a bike lane here. We're so close to the Willis Avenue Bridge, which is such a critical link in the city's bike network. And as more people live here and more people, work here, and there's more businesses, we're going to see more and more deliveries. Even if there wasn't a greenway being proposed, and we were looking at this corridor, we would probably still would have taken on bike lanes. Because what we found over the years is that when you redesign a street and you don't take bikes into account, they show up anyways. And then you need to rethink it and go back again.
How does the proposal adjacent to the school here, how does it take into account the double parking? Because you said that you don't want people to double park, but that's pretty hard to control considering the amount that happens here already. So
It's absolutely going to be a challenge, and it's something we're gonna have to stick on, and it's one of those things I mentioned earlier that, there's often an adjustment period or a learning curve afterward. I mean, I think part of the problem today is that it's just so easy to double park, people can get around you, there's not that many people going this way, even going eastbound. And I think at first, when we tighten it up and we make it more challenging to do it, people will try to do it anyways, and it'll be a little messy. But, you know, we plan to continue our dialogue with the community board and the school. We also have a team, an internal DOT team called the Street Ambassadors, who, you know, can meet with people on the street and sort of explain to them how the street works now. There's often like a lot of misunderstanding of this new street design. But, you know, we did try to leave, sorry, I can find it. We tried to leave a little bit of flexibility there. You know, part of the design was that this lane is a little wide, and that there's this painted median here that would continue to have the bollards in it to prevent double parking, but maybe we could position them a little bit towards the top of this 4-foot space so that maybe there's enough room for people to get around. We don't want people to double park, and we don't want to, you know, go out of our way to accommodate illegal behavior, but we recognize the challenge, and we're gonna, you know, this could be also one of the things that we have to make adjustments.
But this is what I'm thinking, so if all the parking lane is taken completely, and there's someone that is driving to drop off their child here at the school, would they be able to do traffic if they stop? Like, would cars be able to get around them if they can't park in the parking lane itself because it's already full? Is that a possibility?
That's right, yes. Yeah, just like anywhere, if somebody's parked at the curb and somebody insists on stopping, they will be blocking them, absolutely.
I think that's a problem.
So I think what you're not saying, so you see where the buses, so that has buses right now, but that would be empty, right? So the cars would pull in. There's no parking.
So is it a parking lane or not?
Yeah, it's a parking lane, yeah, this is the floating parking. But so the question is, I think the bigger question is there a way for us to make the street safer for kids and more, less chaotic while still permitting rampant double parking? And the answer, I think, unfortunately, is no. If we want to leave it wide open so that you can double park and you're right, it's okay, you're not blocking traffic, go ahead, leave your car on the street. To do that, and to also tighten up these crosswalks and make it safer across the street, they're mutually exclusive.
So where are these yellow buses? That's parking?
Yes.
So that wouldn't be designated space like what we have now where there's no parking from 7 to 7?
Oh, no, it would be the same parking rate.
Okay.
So it's not like, yeah, people are parking, they're parking here all day. Like, so what happens
Regulation
today?
right now is no parking 7 to 7.
Yeah. And keeping that clear is, I think, for a lot of schools and police departments is a challenge. But.
After 7.
I guess the bigger question is, you see those yellow buses, they never move after they drop off their kids. The question I believe he's trying to ask, how are people supposed to drop off their kids?
You have no drop offs.
There is no drop off point. Those
Without
buses are not
traffic,
moving.
yeah.
They're not moving.
Well, yellow buses don't stay. They just drop off and they go.
Sometimes they stay there forever. They won't move. That's my question. What's the alternative to those buses not moving? After they drop off their kids, some of those drivers get out, start talking to the other driver, or they're talking to the teacher, then you have a wall of cars, people trying to drop off their kids, and they gotta go to work. That's what causes the double park, the stopping in the middle, or sometimes they have the red flashing stoplight, sign that's backed up, and there's a whole bunch of people trying to drop off their kids to school. There's no place, and if you eliminate more parking spaces, it's even worse. That's the question.
So I think that, first of all, this is specific to this one and this school or this location. You may generally see that across the city or in the Bronx in your experience. But we took a look at how these buses operate on this block. Okay, and they don't stay here long. We study this. And also, I would also say that what we see more now is that parents actually double park on the opposite side and cross the street.
For this movie?
Yes. So we took a look at, what we do is we look at this site and we said, so we're going to look at a road shot. So we took that into account.
That would be worse. I mean, isn't that the heavier, I'm sorry, I didn't have a question. Isn't that the heavier side of driving? So if you see that a lot of people don't park there, that's kind of a problem.
But they're already doing that today.
Right.
Like if we did nothing, they would still go. What we're doing is we're also making that mid-block crossing so you can cross safer and not cross into the traffic.
just saying, if you're just thinking as
I wish you
putting
could,
myself in the driver's, in their shoes.
I wish you could tell the parents that tonight.
And I think one of the things is that relying on enforcement, right? Like accommodating double parking can't happen, right? So we need to have enforcement to say, you gotta drop your kid or you gotta keep going. Or, you know,
Well, when you
we
see
don't wanna accommodate.
the parent wants to stop, walk the child across the street. They don't just want to sit there. So they want to bring a proper car, cross the child, the street with the child. And then they can go back into the car when the child goes in. And that level, I think that's another time you're talking about it. A lot of, from looking at it, also, a lot of parents are coming this way. Very few go this way with the car. So any accommodation on this side is not really doing that much because parents are coming from the two-way to one end.
Yeah, thank you. South Bronx United's office is around Lincoln and Buckner. And we have been very worried about the safety of kids here because we have seen them cross the streets and, you know, up until maybe a few months ago, there was a free crossing, right? And so, very much welcoming of this plan. And, you know, Marvin and South Bronx United, we've been in touch around that problem with the Greenway, of course, and in the session that we had at Bronx Brewery, we were also supportive of Buckner versus 138 for the reasons you mentioned. Some of you might know that we're an environmental justice organization, and this community is disproportionately pollution burden, right? And one of the main culprits is vehicles, right? Particularly medium and heavy vehicles. So we are welcoming of any sort of traffic calming as well as, you know, bike path plans. I'm just curious about, you know, Buckner Boulevard can get very congested, right? And like just like sitting in the car type traffic where nothing's moving. So I'm curious about you know, whether you look at traffic flow with this plan, because this community can't accommodate any more pollution. And if that means more cars are just sitting there as a result of this, then as much as we're welcome of it, you know, we would want to push for, you know, maybe some adjustment where that isn't the case. But I'm just curious about, you know, whether you looked at that.
Absolutely, and we collect data. The way the traffic analysis works is we collect turning movement counts data at every intersection. So at every intersection, we have a contractor go out, count for hours and hours and days, how many cars are going straight, how many are turning left, how many are trucks versus buses versus cars. You know, and we look at it throughout the whole corridor, and then we also observe video to make sure we're not missing out on anything, that there wasn't an extreme congestion that was holding traffic back. And then we feed it into a traffic model, and we include, you know, the signal timing and all the different ways that it's all coordinated, and look at it and we kind of calibrate it to make sure it looks like what we're seeing out there today. And I have to say, we've seen some congestion out here, but most of the times we've been here, we've seen pretty free flow heading towards the bridge. So I'm curious about some of your experiences. Now, there's a lot going on here, and with this feeding into the Third Avenue Bridge, there could be a pinch point, you know, miles away, bleeding back to here. I can say that in the other direction, pinch point at 138th and Bruckner backs up all the way to 116th Street. So sometimes with these things, it's difficult to establish the cause of the congestion. But based on the volumes that we've been seeing the last several years on Bruckner Boulevard, it should fit two westbound lanes just fine. And so as part of the change, we calibrate our model to make sure it looks like what we're seeing out there in the field, and then we start tweaking with it. Say, what if we removed an eastbound lane? Or what if we added a leading pedestrian? What impact would that have? We can see what it would do to queue lanes, and what it would do to the time the average driver is stuck waiting there. And we had to make some adjustments to make it all kind of work. But based on our analysis, we're very confident that this will work.
And you're right, I think the traffic is really further east, sort of past St. Anne's and Brown.
Yeah, as soon as you get off from the exit of the Willis Avenue Bridge, it's just mayhem all the way up to 138th Street, which is a tough thing to think about because I always think of Bruckner Boulevard. Oh, that's never ending queue. But down here, west of Willis Avenue, it's just such a different place.
That might also, Willis, once you come off the Willis Avenue, you go eastbound, that first light, it like changes, it's red for a long period of time. And it doesn't work with the other lights ahead, so it's like you stop and then you stop again. So that also, I'm wondering, was that considered too, those lights?
If and when we do phase two, that will definitely be something we look at. But I'll just tell you up front, without having gone too deeply into it, that it's a tough one to break because there's just more demand than there is capacity. You know, so there's a rush hour regulation of the south curve, gives you an extra lane. There's not 3 lanes of flow, but it's kind of just to store people. There's 3 right turn lanes coming off the bridge, even though there aren't 3 receiving lanes, but they're just everybody's packed, kind of piling together. Very awkward situation. Very hard to design around that kind of extreme congestion.
I also just mentioned 2 things, you know, like by design, if you are facing an intersection, you're both going different directions, one person has to stop the other one to go. So whenever you're red, that means someone else gets green. And we take a look into account, like how many cars are going this way, and that'll translate to the number of seconds that are green that way, so that we can go this way. And the second thing as well is that, I also hear that a lot too when I go to different boards. It's like, you know, I got a green light, I got another red light, another red light. Why was that? A lot of times we do that on purpose on corridors where people are speeding. Because if you give someone 4 green lights, what do you think they're going to do?
That makes sense, yeah.
So by design, you want traffic to move. You don't want it to move too freely. When you're telling someone, hit the gas, go for it.
Makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I wanted to ask a question about the amenities besides what you're showing here. So you added this lighting, the timing around the crosswalks and so on. Can you go into some more conversations about that?
Yeah, let me go to a map. Wait, wrong direction. Sorry. Map somewhere. Here's a map. Okay, so leading pedestrian interval, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. I was talking about signal timing is incredibly boring, but it's a surprisingly powerful tool. So the leading pedestrian interval, the idea is that the walk signal starts before the vehicular green signal. And what sometimes happens is as soon as the light turns green, drivers will try to gun it. They try to turn left really hard, it's going to go, or they're going to try to get in before the cars come in the other direction, before pedestrians come out. And that can lead to some pretty nasty crashes. So by giving 7, maybe 10 seconds of walk before the vehicular phase starts, people walk out to the intersection and they sort of establish their right of way. So that if you're driving by the time the light turns green, you're not just going to gun it. The street's full of people already, you kind of have to yield. And they have great, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but we have really good results in reducing pedestrian injuries. So the plan is to install a leading pedestrian interval, or an LPI, I'll call it, up here at Bruckner and Lincoln. So when you're crossing Bruckner, you get a 7-second head start, and if you're crossing Lincoln, same thing, you get a 7-second head start. So that's the one there. At Alexander, we're planning the same thing, but also a protected turn phase. So still the LPI is crossing Bruckner and crossing Alexander, but also a protected westbound left turn phase. So if you're walking on the south crosswalk, you have no conflicts with left turning drivers, which is one benefit there. And then at Willis, that's one I should show the proposal, which would be primary. Oh. Got excited.
Yeah.
Do it here.
You can go to those 3 dots over on your right.
Oh.
Just preview.
Faster. Oh, yeah, that's nice. So, there, Willis. So the signal phasing today is first Bruckner Boulevard goes in both directions. Then the southbound goes. And when the southbound goes today, this crosswalk is green, which is terrible. And this crosswalk is held, it's so far away, cars can first phase, Bruckner Boulevard. Second signal phase, people coming down off of the Major Deegan. And the third signal phase is the northbound, people coming up here, which is almost no cars at all. So by flipping this to one-way southbound and getting rid of the northbound phase, the new phasing would be first the Bruckner Boulevard phase, right? So cars going down Bruckner. Then the southbound phase off to the Major Deegan, but with this crosswalk not active. And then the barn stands, the all pedestrian phase. So how many crosswalks do we have here? 7. All the crosswalks would have the walk phase, and give you enough time to cross, and all the cars would be out there. It actually functions very similar to how it does today, because the length of the Bruckner Boulevard phase would be the same as it is today. The length of the phase of people getting off Deegan will be the same, but the length of what's currently the northbound phase, all the crosswalks would get to go.
And I'll ask about the lighting, because I know that here from the school, doing the winter season, it's dark. And so the changes happening, especially the shared space that's going with the bike traffic and students getting off. And if you're using reflective material that's gonna reflect off the light, the street lighting, so that it's visible, especially with the changes you're making, so that folks are not become accustomed to the changes that being made. Is that something that your office is thinking of?
Yeah, sorry, so you were talking more about lighting.
Lighting, signage, whatever, what are you doing more so that folks pick up on this? We have bars here, we have other things here, so on, so I'm just asking, how we decide this changes? Are we ensuring that folks see this daytime, nighttime, it's visible, and become accustomed to it in a way so that it's workable?
Two things. One is, once we redesign fresh paint, that'll increase visibility, because the type of paint that it is, how it's made. But separately, we don't have, as part of this plan, a plan to add new light poles, for example, but that's something that we do 24/7, 365. Like, someone calls 811 or even calls our office, take this lights out, we need to initiate a request to fix the lights. So if that ever happens at any point, that can be done separately from this project, but there is no current plan to add new lighting as part of this proposal.
But we would be adding a lot of reflective material. So all along pedestrian spaces, we always install these little flexible bollards. They're called flexible lineators. They're floppy. You can drive over them, it doesn't really matter. But they've got the the reflective material on them. So we install those all over painted pedestrian spaces to make sure they're seen. When we do, granite blocks or planters, we have little reflective things we install on those. And then I think, kind of like you can see here, there's new signs. The signs kind of telling people at the edge of the space that the conditions are changing, and that stuff all, really high reflective material. So in our experience, it's still visible at night, but, we can take a look and see how it's working, of course.
I think also, I was gonna say also in terms of predictability, the goal is to try to at least start this before school comes back, because that's really when the traffic will pick up again, and that way parents will get accustomed to it as school begins, rather than having to do it like midway through the school year.
I'll also just add that this particular corridor already has upgraded LED lighting. So in some districts, you might see special non-standard decorative lighting, like in parks, you have the B poles, in parks, you have the F-type poles. But these are standard, have already been upgraded, and they're as bright as it gets.
And I know sometimes when you do the paint, you use some of that, some kind of, I don't know, it's sparkles, you know, stuff that's kind of nice, off the lights, I don't know, but it's visible.
That's what I mean in terms of the fresh paint will help. Like sometimes things wear off and you kind of get blurry, but it will help with that to a certain degree. So a nice, cleanly, well organized street.
It's hard to put a dollar amount to that. We're using our in-house on-call contracts. We have a markings contract. We have in-house staff that would build the concrete islands. We have in-house staff that would do a lot of the signal design work, but we have external contracts for building a lot of the new stuff. So I can't provide a number right now.
That's I was gonna say, that's the beauty of us being able to do this through a street and local project. As you mentioned, we use existing contracts, whereas if it was a capital project, we need to find the money allocated by an elected official or something that could only go towards that project. Whereas for this, there's a big pot citywide, it's like We have this money as a city to make our streets safe. It's not about like this street is 5 billion, that street is 3 billion. It's just let's just make it safe.
And the timeline, so you're saying that this would be expected to be completed September?
That would be the goal, yes, to try to do this before school comes back, so that after parents come back to school, the changes are already made and it's more of a better adjustment period for them.
I don't know what, there's a lot of construction. It has been tremendously invasive to our quality of life, right? For several months, you say good, right? That could be a challenge, because there's been so much, construction with financing that has been like drilling into the ground at 7 days a week, 8 months. So this would be another set of, an extension, potentially, of disruption. The community side, I would have you consider that.
I hear that. I think most of the construction for this would be pretty subtle compared to Con Ed. You know, there's crews that come out and say like, you know, remove some of these bollards initially, and remove the existing markings and lay out where the new markings will go. And there's construction vehicles around. It's not, you know, it's not nothing, but it's not the same as, you know, digging deep and ripping up the sewers. Now, if and when we build the new signal, the new mid-block signal here, that will be a more intense effort. Because we have to, or our contractor has to dig up the street, dig up space for conduit, and build these new poles, build foundations. That'll be a little more intense. But the bulk of the work is pretty quick. It's considered operations work for us. It's not really, it's construction, but it's not construction of the same scale. But I definitely hear you. There's construction from my house, and it's making me.
I would just also add that a lot of this work needs to happen in the warmer months. Like, we can't lay down this type of paint unless it's an average of 45 degrees or warmer for at least 3 days consecutively, or else it won't dry right. So like, it's not so much as coordination, it's more so that everyone's got a shot to do it in these months of the year, or else it's not gonna get done. If you try to do it in December or January, it just won't come out right, we'll just won't get anything where they're supposed to be done.
Yeah, and we also go out and flyer, we put out what's happening here flyers so that everybody knows that the construction is coming and we can give the community more one update when the mid-block signal is supposed to get started and so the community residents that we're coming to do that work.
And one more thing to add is, even when Con Ed does work, they get a permit to us. Like, they have to ask for our permission for permit, and it's coordinated through DOT's Office of Construction, Mitigation, and Coordination. And that's the purpose of the office. Con Ed has a permit here, and so if it's over there, then we know it's going to be coming on the street. We won't show up and be surprised.
When you are under this administration, mopeds or scooters that are driving around the district, when you have, or this from the city period, when you have shared space, do you post signs about how fast, give that likely of kids and parents going to be able to go, how fast the scooters can connect to the bike lane, how fast they can go in those areas where the shared space is coming up, and so on?
So I'll answer that generally, not asking the specific design. Generally, we do try to work on that. At Sport Division 0, we focus on what we call the 3Es. It's engineering, enforcement, and education. This is the engineering, redesign the streets. Enforcement, we work with NYPD and other agencies that can help when needed, issue tickets to people that are driving dangerously on the sidewalk or going 40 miles per hour on a bike lane, but also education. We've also started marketing campaigns. You'll see us at bus stops, on trains, and other places, on TV, on radio, trying to educate people to say, listen, there are particular types of two-wheeled vehicles that are allowed to be on certain places, but you can't necessarily ride 60 miles per hour on the sidewalk. So through those multiple mediums, engineering, enforcement, education, we are working on that. And this particular space was designed in a way to tell riders they shouldn't be speeding on that way. That's what we use for the shared space design.
It's an interesting point, and I think when this was installed years ago, the mopeds and the e-bikes weren't this issue, such a big issue as they are today. So there are a few things we can do. I think the standard is a sign that says like bike slow. But I think maybe we should explore doing something like you're talking about, speed limit. You can also install rumble strips, similar when you're driving on a highway and there's rumble strips that force you to slow down. We have those for bikes as well, so that's something we can proceed investigating.
That goes back on the point, that whole stretching, brother, especially focuses on, and that should be that rate, 15 miles per hour, they go with that. That's it, it's a slow drive, slow drive area, 15 miles an hour. Wow. School safety zone, that's how good that's way to go. And that's getting closer.
I think as we're considering the rest of the corridor, we'll consider that. Right now, the improvements are specific to between Willis and Lincoln, and then also by the South Bronx Classical Charter School. It would be like a disruption to be like 10 miles per hour, then 25.
No, I'm not talking about that, I'm not talking about that. For straight move from Brooklyn, they come up to, they make their right turn, come on, Brooklyn, come straight down, starting from right there. There'll be 15 miles per hour, slow driving, all the way to Gate, go here, y'all, that whole stretch. That's it, one speed limit.
That's something that we can take a look at, yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea.
I have a question. Traffic, the congestion we have, after the bridge there, it goes all the way to 138th Street. Have you ever looked into those, when you go under the turn, under the path by the charter school? Apparently, and I drive the edge there, so apparently when the car get onto the highway, on 138th Street, when they block that area, the car can go on Bronx Street. So there is a problem there, we have two lanes turning in to get into the 278, right? And that congestion always comes all the way to the first side, because the car here can turn in the light, and set the section line, the gas station, there's no road in the next light. So I think for somehow, you say you don't wanna reduce the speed by adding more light, but it's causing problems further down, because this congestion from First Avenue goes all the way to 138th Street. Is there any way we could have the traffic on Brooklyn, instead of those that are going to the highway, to go around the school on the right-hand side, go straight into the highway, and then let's the one that goes to Brooklyn Road on the street? You just showed earlier on the map there, instead of making that left turn to go underneath of the underpass, they go straight and make a left turn, because I use it myself when I pass it, and I found that to be faster than going through under the tunnel. You see this, yeah, you see the soup there?
So you go down 133rd?
Yes, I go there and make a left.
Where on Cypress?
Yes, make a left and go straight. I can have access to the overpass, to the 278, straight on the right. Now, coming down here, because those that go under the right there, they have a 2-lane. Once they turn, we that are going straight, we can't move until that period. And that's what is most of the problem we have in this.
Oh, I see. So you're coming down Bruckner, and because Bruckner's dumped up, you can't get to 133rd, you're forced to fight your way down Bruckner to get to this point. What you're saying?
Like, if you're going to 138th Street from Brooklyn, right? If you are on the right-hand side of the charter school, if you are going straight there, and make a left, right? Then I can access the ramp easy and fast than going down there's a tunnel there.
You can't go to 130. You gotta keep going. You can't like turn.
Oh, that's right, because you're on the service road and you
Right, you
can't go across.
Right.
Because that's where a lot of congestion takes place at that place there, because the light is there.
But I think the cars are doing that now, right? They go to Cypress. If you wanna make the left to 138th Street, because you can't make the left from Brockton on 138th Street.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah, you can't make it exactly.
Well, they do, they make the right turn and go halfway down.
Right, you turn and you turn. But that 138th Street intersection is.
That's where the problem is.
the morning.
Yeah, this is where the problem is. You know, the rush hour, that's where the problem is.
Technically, it's not what we're here to talk about tonight, but I did work on it several years ago, and I can tell you that it seems simple, it seems like an intersection where there's Bruckner and 138, but there's really like 10
Yeah.
legs to this intersection, because you've got the highway, the express, like heading to the highway, you've got the service roads, they can't weave in the intersection and also turn, it's so complicated.
And you only have so much time to work with at each of these intersections. So we're prioritizing, giving everyone.
Yeah, and we're trying to get pedestrians across too, it's such a long
Really
process.
awesome.
Broken that way for decades. It's been that way, it's gonna be built there.
All right, so, but you don't have any question, represent the department for I guess to, make a presentation. I mean, communication is very key to making works. Once we know what is happening, I think we feel less stress. We don't know what's going on. So, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Old business. John.
There's nothing. I put this to make the motion. I put this Can we turn the camera off?
I'm not a fan of that, there's certain things that they can change that be better. But you need the crosswalk there for sure.
I'm sorry.
You can do that. You can do the 15 mile and then 25.
No.